Walt Disney Company, Marvel Studios, and Marvel Entertainment are at a crossroads, and we've been talking about that a lot here on Valiant Renegade over the past 12 months or so since Phase 4 of the MCU began. But now we're getting some more information from a source inside Marvel, courtesy of WDW Pro and that Park Place, who is joining me today on this video to discuss. As we always do here on Valiant Renegade, we put Hollywood through the business and financial lens of reality, and we always want to discuss this news from the business standpoint, as we say, follow the money. So we try to stay ahead of the game from that. So I'm glad you're watching today. We're going to get right into this video because we have a lot to cover and even more to cover on the Sunday live show right here on Valiant Renegade. Let's get into it. Online. Well, welcome back, folks. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It is good to see everybody out there once again. And of course, if you're like one of the many folks watching this video, or maybe watching this channel for the very first time, please take a moment, hit that subscribe button, turn it from red to gray, hit that notification bell, hit the like button, that little thumbs up, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment below the video before you head out today. We always love getting feedback from the audience, be it good or bad. We've gotten plenty of both. It's no big deal. We just appreciate the comments. We always love to read them and try to answer as many as possible. And also, as a side note, I want to thank everybody for this, for watching the channel, for watching Pro and I in the last few months as we have kind of continued to go down this road. We've recently hit 1 million views on this channel just a few days ago, so I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody out there. And that Park Place has been a big help, and other friends out there like Cameron Pasha and many of our other great guests that we've had on this show to discuss topics like this today, as we are with Marvel Studios, which apparently is at a crossroads. And Pro, welcome back as always. And you guys over at that Park Place have gotten yet another little pile of information that you just released earlier today in an article on thatparkplace.com. Link, of course, will be in the description below.
Well, what we have today is information coming from a source, and really one of the only good sources that I have had in and around Marvel. I like to be as honest as I can be and as transparent as I can be. And Marvel is one of those cookies that's hard to crack. But this has been a source that's been around for a while, was introduced to me by someone at another studio who was of like mind. But we typically get very small amounts of information out of this source, and it's few and far between. And I suppose that our coverage of the toy analyst, who has been sharing information with us about merchandising sales and major partners with Disney and their frustrations with Marvel, I think that sort of jostled this individual to want to give us a lot of context about what's going on behind the scenes, and partially because they seem concerned that Marvel is going down a path that we've all seen before. It's the same path that we watched Star Wars go down, and so they're a little bit apprehensive about their leadership's decision on where they want to take the studio.
Yeah, and it's we've all seen it. I mean, those of us on YouTube, those like people like you on the media side of things, the fans out there certainly have seen it. And as I was reading this article today, I kind of chuckled a little bit because this is a lot of stuff that I've talked about here on YouTube for over a year now. And I had a video last summer about, the decline of Marvel, and I've had a few of those as time has gone on, but the first one was last summer. Like, what if Kevin Feige leaves? And we brought up a lot of the things. We could see the writing on the wall. And now, again, we have a source that is at least seemingly confirming a lot of this information from the inside that we've been speculating on, that Marvel was following that trend line of Lucasfilm. To be sure, they were a few years behind Lucasfilm, and they're catching up to the doldrums that they have. So there was a lot of stuff in this article, and this is going to be more than we can possibly go into in this video. And I bring that up only to let folks know that we're going to cover some of the high points today, some very interesting pieces, and then Pro and I are going to have a more lengthy discussion on this during the next live show. Now, our live shows are usually on Sunday afternoons at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on Valiant Renegade. So make sure, again, you are subscribed and you got your notifications turned on. Or mark your calendars if you want. Come back in. You can join in the chat if you're a subscriber. You can join in the chat, super chat, all that kind of stuff. We tend to interact with the audience from that standpoint. So, Pro, kind of take us through some of the key pieces of this that you got today.
Yeah, I think there are two main pieces of information which are new. And so the first piece of information that is new and worth talking about, because like you were saying, some of this confirms what we've been thinking, but some of this runs contrary to what we've been covering even on that Park Place. And again, all about transparency. We included where this source critiqued us and said, hey, you guys are off on this and you've been off on this. And so we try to include that. Now, I cannot confirm that this source is absolutely right on everything. We're just transmitting what the source says, and we can verify that the source is on the inside of Marvel. But the first thing that they have provided that is new is when they explain why Marvel is going in the direction that some have called woke, or some have called going hard to the left, whatever you might call it, the identity politics, playing to demographics and hard segregation of those demographics into groups where you try to appeal to only a certain community. What the source says is that essentially Marvel had intended to reach a saturation point in the West and that they accomplished that. But then the next thing that they had planned to do was to really grow their market in China. And that has completely collapsed. It's not because the Chinese people turned Marvel away or became disinterested in Marvel, but it's rather because the Chinese government wants to have the biggest movies be produced in China, play in China, and be Chinese films. And Marvel is causing China to struggle to do that, and China still hasn't succeeded in it. And so what the source says is that China has essentially kicked Marvel out. They're not letting them play their movies there so that China can obtain that goal. And that means that Marvel is trying to find new avenues for growth because they've lost out on Beijing. And so their strategy, headed by Kevin Feige, is to now appeal to demographics in Western countries, which Marvel did not appeal to previously. The interesting thing about that is the source says that apparently Marvel leadership believes that the demographics, which were already fans of Marvel, will stick with the MCU through all of this. So some of those groups that were listed were, I believe they talked about the white or Caucasian groups, the conservative groups, the Christian groups, maybe Christian Judeo groups, however you want to categorize these individuals or these families. Marvel apparently thinks that those groups will stay with them while they do outreach to the other groups. And then I think also the source mentioned that may be getting reassessed. And we'll be covering that as well coming up in future articles. I don't want to get off topic, but there's a new poll that came out recently that showed that Disney is really falling underwater in perception. So
we're going to talk more about that Sunday. I saw that as well. I actually contacted the pollster who did it to try to get some additional information. I don't know if I'm going to get a response. I'm hoping that they'll be able to provide more of the demographic data, the crosstabs on the makeup of the 1,000 registered voters that responded to the poll request. I'd like to know ages, gender. I'd like to know ethnic, racial background. That's usually what's in the crosstabs, so you can see more clearly, as opposed to just saying Republicans said this, Democrats said this, Independents said this. And I mean, that's great. That's a good start. But I'm more interested, mostly in the age ranges of that. So hopefully by Sunday, if I'm lucky, I'll get a response and we'll have some more. We'll discuss that on the live stream as well. But back to the article. Let me go ahead and pull this up because I neglected to do this earlier. This is the article from that Park Place. Again, link will be in the video description below. Marvel Insider spills the beans. What's really going on with Feige and Chapek? And something you just mentioned, I want to read from what you had in the article. That's why I'm worried, along with others, that this is going down the Star Wars black hole. They don't mean to make it political. They just are political, and they don't know it. It's not enough to have diversity based on background. We have to have diversity based on the way people act. Why do you think She-Hulk is how it is? They're trying to create a new Marvel market for neo-feminist women. We're trying to grow in every direction all at once, and we have the belief that the old fans will stick with it through all of this. So there you go. That's something we've touched on before, and they have taken the audience for granted. They think that the audience will just keep showing up, and I think I was talking about that last summer when Kevin Feige started making his tour out there for Phase 4, talking about Shang-Chi and the Eternals, and the first thing that they started discussing on those films before they came out as part of the marketing campaign was how diverse they were and how representative they were and how this and how that. And I kept saying, who cares? Is it a good movie? What's the story about? And that's what I started saying. I think they're taking for granted all of the goodwill capital that they've built up through Endgame, and they think that they can slog through this and still have everybody show up. Well, it's been a year and several movies later, and we now know that that is definitively false. So you mentioned that they're reassessing, and that's not surprising because I think the source is talking about this is what's been going on up to this point. Well, obviously, I think there have been more and more discussions over the summer as movies like Thor have underperformed to what their expectations were, that maybe they are rethinking this now. Where are you on this?
Well, they have got to be reassessing the strategy, I believe. Now, whether or not they're coming to a conclusion that will help them be more profitable, I don't know. But I would say that even more so than the box office issues they've had, and we could go into those, we could talk about the drop-offs they've seen after those first and second weekends, right, when it's clear and it's evident that past the hardcore, they're losing out on the fan base that was. But I think more so the problem is the Disney Plus stuff.
Yes.
And when we see Miss Marvel unable to get into the top 10 on new streaming shows, that's a major issue. That's an indicator that Marvel is losing its touch because people aren't tuning into things that they don't connect with right off the bat. And then I think that we're going to see the same thing with She-Hulk. We're getting those early indicators that it's the case. Everything that could be done poorly is done poorly, and you would be hard-pressed to be able to make something worse than the 4th episode of She-Hulk. If that continues, and if that's the route that they're going to keep going, it's time for a hard 180 from this stuff because it's bad.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was going to bring this up, and I don't know if you've seen this yet, but I want to read one more quote from the article that leads into this because it does cycle back on what we're talking about, and I think it's important. So again, from the article, your source, this is your source's words, or at least as Manu has changed them a little bit to help conceal this source's identity. It
Correct.
won't work in the long run. Now, you might ask, and this is key, and we're going to talk about this a lot more on Sunday, because this does touch on something I've said before, not only about Chapek, but David Zaslav as well when it comes to making woke stuff, okay? Now, you might ask why Bob Chapek is letting this happen. He came down hard on Lucasfilm and Pixar. The people working there are at their lowest morale. Very little coming to theaters. Their creative control has dropped. So why not the same for Marvel? And we're going to talk more about that Sunday, but I want to show you this since you mentioned Disney Plus. And Pro, I don't know if you've seen these yet. Here's the new numbers, and look at where Lightyear is. It's lost half of its watch time.
Oh my gosh.
It lost half of its watch time from its opening week. Its opening week had 1.3 billion watch minutes on Disney Plus. In its second week, it plummeted down to 700. Now, I want to remind everybody, and I can't pull it up. Unfortunately, I don't know why Nielsen does not archive previous weeks on their website. It drives me bonkers. If it's there, I haven't found it, and I apologize. Look at Uncharted. It actually moved up to the number 1 spot. Lightyear fell down to number 3, half the watch time that it had the week before. And I want to remind everybody that Encanto, when that came out, it actually built. Encanto, it hung around at 1.5 billion watch minutes per week for a month and a half, and then it gradually went down. Encanto didn't have a 700 million minutes watched until it had been out for almost, I think, 2 months at that point. So
yeah, just looking at this, it would appear that Lightyear will come in at about a quarter of Encanto's run over 8 weeks. Just looking at it and looking at the precipitous drop, you would think Lightyear
quarter
it may
might
even come
be
in
generous.
That's what I was going to say. It may even come in at a fifth. So
yeah,
and you got to think too. Encanto was a flop at the box office. Now I'm not saying it was a flop online. It became sort of a phenomenon on Disney Plus, but
Yep.
it was
The
still a
soundtrack
flop.
did it.
It's
The
not
music
like
did
was,
it. And
yeah.
yeah.
So we're not comparing Lightyear to something that was this massive cultural moment in the box
Mhm.
office. We're comparing it to a flop that had a surprisingly good showing on Disney Plus.
But that's kind of what's going on right now, in terms of how people are looking at this. But is kind of a taste for, I think, what we'll get into more detail on Sunday. The question now you might ask, why is Bob Chapek letting this happen? And there's some pieces in the article where he goes into some detail, and as I'm reading it, I'm nodding my head, and I was like, I get this because I've touched on this before. And that is that David Zaslav and Bob Chapek, to me, it's not about woke and not woke. It's what makes money, right? And I've said before, because people asked about David Zaslav, he's going to come in and he started chopping heads and all this is going to go and this is going to go. And I was like, well, yes, but if they think they can still make a product for the right price that they can sell to a different audience or a woke audience or whatever you want to call it, then they'll do it. They'll do it as long as they think they can make money. I think what's happening now with Disney is they're coming to the realization that they can't make money on this. They can't open up these markets to this what the source referred to as this neo-feminist market. That's what She-Hulk was meant for, right? Well, they're not watching the show in large numbers, or there aren't large enough numbers of them to watch the show, so it seems, because they're not. It's not like She-Hulk is anywhere close to breaking any records here. It's a mid to low level performing Marvel show at best in terms of ratings.
And has to be dropping. Just has to be dropping.
Has to be dropping. But that market, as they're learning, they cannot force that market into behaving like their traditional markets behave. And by that, I mean, they're not going to go out and buy She-Hulk merchandise. They're probably not going to engage with the show much more beyond making a TikTok meme or a Twitter post. And that's going to be about it. There's no money in it. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that as you got this information from the source. What was kind of your reaction to that?
Well, so I would say that with She-Hulk, at the very least, if you're going to make a show that's aimed at these new markets, if you're aiming at these new demographics, which were previously not highly engaged with your property, they at least have to be good. And what I heard about Miss Marvel, now I didn't spend any time watching it, but I heard that Miss Marvel was at least a quality show, even if it could not find an audience. But when it comes to She-Hulk, I mean, I just think it's really bad. And it sort of reminds me of some of these Phase 4 movies that came out that maybe they weren't all the way bad. Maybe I wouldn't rate them as low as I would the latest She-Hulk episode, but they're certainly not in the same category as those earlier Marvel movies that made this engine run. And, I don't know how long you can go without having fantastic movies. I mean, it's not as if you can just slap the name Marvel on something forever and people will just keep watching it. There was a reason people came to the brand originally. So that's my thoughts on it. But let me say this too. I do think one of the other important things that we should mention is that the source says that people may be wondering, why does Bob Chapek not come down on Marvel? Why is he not asserting his power over them, as we've seen with some of the other studios? I mean, you look at Lucasfilm, you can't think that Lucasfilm wants to have zero theatrical releases coming up in regards to Star Wars, yet that's the situation they find themselves in, even if they might say otherwise. So what's going on with Marvel? Why are they getting to go farther and farther into this stuff? And the source basically says that Kevin Feige is bringing Bob Chapek's son, who has worked at Marvel, Brian Chapek, is accelerating him into high levels of power. And that may be to keep Chapek off of the trail of Marvel, because he would have to be critical of his own son. And if you look at Brian's track record, it turns out, guess what? He was just the producer on Thor: Love and Thunder.
Ragnarok and Love and Thunder. Yeah,
that's right. So if you didn't like Thor: Love and Thunder, if you thought Thor 4 was no good, no bueno, you got to blame it on a Chapek maybe two, but at least one.
To some degree. And again, I want to do a little bit more digging on that because, as a lot of folks that work in Hollywood will tell you, getting the title of producer can mean anything from you were there every day on the set to where you introduced the director to the actor or something like that, and you had virtually Steven Spielberg's going to be a producer on Indy 5. Has nothing to do with that movie. So it could have been something to where he was listed as a producer as kind of a, Feige hat tip to the big boss, to Bob, Brian's daddy. He could have been more involved with it. I just don't know yet. So that's something I want to dig a little bit more into. But
here's a funny little anecdote about that. Of course, you're aware that in the past, Feige and Big Bob Chapek have they've sort of collided a little bit and disagreed publicly, and that was in regard to the handling of Black Widow and the money side of it.
Yeah.
However, it seems that things have turned around a little bit because the baby Thor, I guess is what they're calling it, the infant version of Thor, was actually based on Bob Chapek's grandson, the son of Brian Chapek. So
I read that, yeah.
Yeah, Feige knows how to play the game, it looks like. Or somebody does.
Yeah. Trying to get along and get things moving. And I think, again, there's going to be more attention getting paid to Marvel. And I'll leave it with this because, again, I think this will be another good topic to discuss Sunday. And you and I have been talking about, there's much bigger fish to fry at Disney. Right, we got the NFL season kicking off. You've got major sports leagues now for the next 9 months. I mean, that's what generates a ton of money for the Walt Disney Company. College football, especially, billions and billions and billions of dollars for this. I was talking the other day. Amazon. Let's not talk about Lord of the Rings for a second, but Amazon Prime that signed an 11-year deal, if memory serves, $1 billion a year for Thursday night football, 15 games per season for the NFL. $1 billion a year. That's what Amazon Prime did.
Too, and they know it.
Yeah, and Disney pays about 2.5 times that. They pay about $2.5 billion per year for their contract for Monday Night Football on ESPN. Just to give you an idea of, you're talking about viewership. That's where the freaking money is, right? Disney has those big fish to fry. And more importantly, like you talked about with theatrical releases with Marvel and Star Wars, and why we're not seeing, they're just dead in the water right now, especially Lucasfilm's totally dead in the water. And why they're not rushing to get this fixed more quickly is exactly what you said earlier. The focus is more about Disney Plus right now, jamming content in there, getting more subs in. We just saw them do this, $2, initiation month, if you sign back up for Disney Plus. Of course, we got D23 going on right now. Big tie-ins to park discounts because, and this is the thing, folks, this is what's key. If a few Marvel movies don't do great at the box office, or a few other Star Wars movies come out, which they won't, and those do poorly at the box office, the effect that would have on the investor perception of Disney would be a paltry fraction of what would happen if Disney fails to meet their fiscal year 2024 goals on Disney Plus. That's all that matters. And I don't think Bob Chapek is going to be doing much to do any radical gear shifts between now and the end of fiscal 24, which is about a year and a half, 2 years, about 2 years away at this point. I think that's where he's going to be laser focused, is Disney Plus and meeting those goals, because that is paramount. That has to be done. If they miss that mark, it's big trouble.
You got to say, too, with the $2 subscription they put out there, I mean, that's basically going nuclear. You're almost giving it away for free at that point. You can't go much lower. I mean, I guess they could pay people, but I mean, that's a tactic that you don't use from a position of power. That's the kind of thing you do when you say, guys, we're stagnant. We have got to get people to start picking up these subs domestically so we can have something to talk about and crow about. But I would also say, too, that beyond, if you lose a movie, okay, so if one movie flops or if two movies flop, that's bad. But like you said, it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what all Disney does. The broader thing that they probably are concerned about would be brand degradation, because when you go into Disney Plus, it's classified into different groupings, right? So you've got the regular Disney stuff, you've got the Marvel stuff, you've got the Star Wars stuff, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to have two of those big categories be diminished in the eyes of your consumers. And that's something they should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, for the Disney Plus content. That's not theatrically so much, but definitely for the Disney Plus exclusive content. Because again, I'm going to pull this up one more time as we head out here, because I want everybody to take a good look at this list. There's a lot of Netflix on there. It's one Disney Plus. There's one Prime Video. Now, again, this is from August 6th through 13th, I think it was. So this is about a month ago. Nielsen numbers are always about a month behind, folks, just as a reminder. Netflix. Netflix is always dominating these charts, meaning when Netflix launches their advertising-based tier, this is what advertisers are looking at and determining how much money they're willing to spend on what streaming platform. That's the issue. That's the issue that Chapek and company are dealing with right now with Disney Plus, getting this to where it is as saleable to advertisers as it is to ESPN. And I'll give you a little hint. I'll talk more about this Sunday. Disney, regardless of this, strangely enough, is in a better position than Netflix because they already have relationships with all these advertisers because of their linear content delivery, and they will be able to, and I promise you they're already doing it. If you're going to wonder why Disney Plus is able to pick up the ads it does, it's because they're going to sell these as bundles with their linear content delivery. Guarantee you, mark my word. So
100%. Yeah, I'm on board with everything you just said.
Pro, any final thoughts before we clear out today? And we'll see everybody Sunday. Pro?
Click on the overall tab on Nielsen real quick.
Yep.
So if we click on the overall, do you see Lightyear's in the 10th spot? And you might think, oh, okay, that's pretty good, right? What's above it, though, that's on Disney Plus? Bluey. Bluey is produced out of Australia. The budget for that cannot be anything, and yet it's beating Lightyear. If you're a Disney executive, you're probably looking at it and saying, how is it possible? How is it possible, and what should we do to change that? That's my final thought on that, and hopefully it carries through to Marvel as well, because Marvel should be up there somewhere, sometime soon.
At some point, right? I expect to see Thor: Love and Thunder break into that top 10 list, although it probably will be there for maybe a week or two, and then it will disappear. I'm betting, like a lot of others, like Lightyear will not be on this list next week. It's guaranteed. It's already a goner. You look at it now. So
we know one interesting thing before we go. One interesting thing. Thor: Love and Thunder is going to be competing against Pinocchio, so it's going to be interesting to see, do those two movies manage to both get in the top 10, or does one outcompete the other for viewership?
And Pinocchio's scores were atrocious, even from critics. And I don't see anybody talking about review bombing on that one. So, any case, we'll talk more about this Sunday. Good to see everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Share this sucker out on the social medias. And, of course, do leave a comment before you head out the door today. And until next time, take care.